Hi, everyone. I can see participants are starting to join. We're going to kick things off in a couple of minutes, not too long, because we want to make sure we use the most of the time available to us. But if you just bear with us for maybe another 30 to 40 seconds while we just allow some of the remaining participants to join us, that'd be great. In the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'd love to know who you are and get an idea of who is joining us. We've got quite a number of RSVPs, which is fantastic. This is obviously a subject that is of a lot of interest to people. We're hoping today that we can calm some of the fears and apprehension particularly about the move from the SETA to QCTO, but also just to share some of our insights and thoughts and learnings and what makes a successful learnership. A question, will we be able to watch this after the fact? Yes, we will be sharing a recording as well as a copy of the deck. So, but please don't leave us. We're going to make sure that this is a very interactive and engaging session. And we've got a nice value add, which we'll be able to offer, which we'll be unveiling at the end of the session. So please do stick around for the duration. All right, I think hopefully we've given a few seconds. It's now 1 minute past one, so we'd like to be prompt. But also, I think anyone who joins now hopefully won't be missing out on too much of the meat. We're going to just kick off with some introductions. But firstly, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. My name's Andrew. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Red and Yellow Creative School of Business. I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Melissa Opperman, the manager of our School of Lifelong Learning. First, before we get into the subject matter of today, which is secrets to a successful learnership, how to run a fantastic learnership, as well as just talking through some of the main points of confusion and concern about the move from SETA to QCTO, I just want to run through some housekeeping. And I've assisted in this by Maxine and Kat, who are steering the ship behind us and making sure that everything runs according to clockwork. They're going to be responsible for keeping Melissa and I honest on time. This is a subject that's very close to our hearts, and so when we get passionate, we do start to talk and get very excited about things. So they'll just be keeping us honest and prodding us if we miss anything. So I think firstly, just we've got the chat functionality. I can see, hi, Sue. I can see everyone starting to introduce themselves and chip in. Please do feed in with your questions. We'll try and answer them. If they are very quick, we'll try and answer them as we go. Otherwise, we're going to try and leave some time for Q&A at the end of the session. Some of you did send through questions in your RSVPs. We're hoping to address as many of those as possible in the presentation itself. If we aren't able to get to them, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards. We're only too happy to set up direct conversations with you to answer any questions and to help you with your learnership journeys and your programs. We're also going to be running a couple of polls. We just get a little bit more information about you and where you are in your learnership and QCTO journeys. I think that is, I mentioned that the recording and deck will be sent out afterwards, so hang tight. The email, I'm not too sure when it will come out. If it doesn't come out today, it'll come out tomorrow at the very latest. And if there's anything, as I said, that we didn't cover, we'll be sharing our email addresses. Please feel free to reach out to either Melissa or me. We're only too happy to chat. We love, as I said, this is a subject we love, and we'll chat to anyone who's willing to talk to us about it. All right, let's move on to the next slide. I think I can see from the delegates that a lot of you are existing clients already, or people that we know. So hello to all of you. There are a number of newcomers. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction to Red and Yellow. It won't take too long, but just a bit of context. We are 30 years old, 31 years old this year. We're one of South Africa's top marketing, advertising, communications, and design colleges. We're a leading provider of design and digital marketing training on the continent, and since 2020, we've been a member of the Honoris United Universities Network. We were founded, as I said, 31 years ago, I see we seem to have skipped past a slide, but we were founded in a corner of Ogilvy, one of the largest and oldest advertising agencies in the world. We were founded in the corner of their office in Cape Town, as a vocational school really geared towards producing work-ready graduates and addressing the gap from graduate to starting out in the workplace. And we've continued that tradition to date. While we are a fully accredited private higher education institution and hold multiple accreditations with the SETAs, QCTOs, we are still very much vocationally oriented, and we care about making sure that young South Africans and mature South Africans get the starts and the movements that they need in an increasingly difficult working environment and a very rapidly evolving landscape. And thankfully, we've been able to stay true to those roots that were planted 31 years ago. We are also very proud to be one of the top ranked colleges, not only in South Africa, but in the continent. We are the #1 ranked creative college on the continent, according to the One Club. Something we're very, very proud of as we celebrate our students and their achievements. In terms of our accreditation, if we can move to the next slide. I mentioned we're obviously a private higher education institution, so accredited by the CHE. We are likewise registered with DHET and SACWA, but we also work in the skills development space with QCTO and for a long time with SETA, which has been our core partner on the in the sector space. We offer programs from NQF level 4 to 8 and work, I think, unlike many providers, we work across the full learning programs matrix. So from bursaries to internships, category B training, short courses and full qualifications, learnerships, skills programs, as well as informal training. We've got programs, I think, products that meet all requirements. And then just a quick overview of some of our partners. Many of you who are on the call today, we're very proud of the relationships and the programs that we've run over the years, and most importantly, of the learners who've graduated, thanks to the support of our employers and our partners. Many of them are now far into their careers and doing very, very well. So learnerships in particular, as you'll hear through all of this, is a format that we're particularly passionate about. Next slide. All right, so a very quick overview. Hopefully most of you already know what a learnership is, but just a recap. It's a work-based learning program that leads to an NQF registered qualification and is directly related to an occupation or field of work. For now, they're managed between the SETAs and the QCTO, but aside from a few qualifications, thankfully some that we have, where we've been afforded an extension until final enrollments until end of June next year, 2026, whereafter all qualifications or SETA qualifications will expire and all new qualifications, all new learnership programs will be offered under the QCTO framework. So quite a lot of transition that's happening over the last couple of years. Thankfully, a stay of execution for many of our popular programs and for many of our employers. But we all know this is coming, and there's only so far that the can be kicked down the road. And I think most importantly, the next slide, the reason why we do this is to get youngsters who would not otherwise have access to, in our case, a premium high quality education, to give them a highly respected qualification from a reputable institution that sets them up for career success. So, you know, Melissa and I, there's a lot of behind the scenes nuts and bolts and admin and headaches and ongoing firefighting and all of that sort of wonderful stuff that goes with running these programs. But you know, when you really look at what they are and the participants on them, they're incredible, and we love to celebrate the achievements of all of the learners who come through our doors. So at no point, I think that's probably the most prevailing tip or insight or lesson or thing that we should remember whenever we're running these programs or talking about them, is never to forget the individuals who are the beneficiaries of them. I'm going to hand over to Melissa now, who's going to talk us a little bit through the journey from SETA to QCTO. So she's going to talk a little bit about the landscape, and then we're going to get into some practical tips and tricks and insights into how to run a successful learnership. After which we will just have a quick run through of some of our upcoming programs, and we're going to try and keep this light, conversational, and engaging. Melissa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and welcome everyone. I think this is one of the main reasons that there's so much interest in thinking of how we are going to move beyond the SETA space into a QCTO world. And I think a lot of the webinars that I've seen roaming around in the last year or two was specifically focused on accreditation. And not a lot really on the implementation of the learnership or the implementation of the qualification per se. And I think it's important here that we talk about the main differences in within the SETA and QCTO realm. Now, originally in the QCTO and in the SETA realm, the SETA programs had a 70% practical component and a 30% knowledge component. That, in essence, hasn't changed as much. It's the structure in the QCTO that really makes the difference. Whereas previously, the 70% would have been incorporated within the workplace, specifically with a logbook. Now there are two elements to this. So a QCTO program would be structured within a knowledge component, which would be 30% of the program still. And the 70% would be split between the practical component, which is practice or simulated events with case studies for the learner to practice prior to actually doing the work experience module with the business. So there is also currently an important space for us to ensure that one of the learnership things between the SETA and the QCTO is that previously, in terms of funding, where funding was specifically only for a 12-month program under the SETA guidance, the QCTO funding will be for the entirety of the program, irrespective whether it is a 1 or a 2-year program. And if we move to the next slide, I think one of the main differences and something that I think employers should be really aware of is the workplace approval process through the QCTO programs. And it is important that before we get to that the QCTO is now just the accreditation body, regulatory and quality assurance. So that is where the SETA was accrediting it before. Now it has moved to the QCTO. But what is the SETA's role then in this world still? Is it still reflected on anything to do with the program or going forward? So the SETA will still be responsible for funding. And so they don't disappear in essence. They still form quite a large part with the employer support, specifically with the students in the workplace, as well as the alignment towards the transitional support for the QCTO program. So they are still one of the main components. They will now further be known as assessment quality partners. So specifically AQPs, if you hear that acronym, that is what it means. But they will be responsible for ensuring the verification, also developing the curriculum alongside of the QCTO, and ensuring prior to submitting it to the QCTO and for public approval through the Gazette, that there is industry alignment. So it's not a space where employers don't have a say anymore in terms of the skills required in the industry within the SETA. So SETA has taken up that responsibility specifically, and they will also be responsible for the examination at the end. Whereas previously the SETA qualifications had a final integrated summative assessment academically. It could have taken the form of an assignment or an examination, which was developed internally and administered internally most of the time. Some SETAs had 1 or 2 externally, so some of you might be aware of that or already used to that. But now with the QCTO qualifications, the SETAs will also assist the QCTO in developing the ASA, which is the external integrated summative assessment at the very end of the qualification. Now, some of the questions which came in specifically asked, how would it be administered? So you have to be an assessment site registered as well, so that students will go and register, but after they have completed all of the components that the QCTO program had to offer. That is how it will work. The SETAs will be responsible for supporting the system, and the QCTO will set the standards. Just to the next slide, the workplace approval process, just to confirm, this is the pathway that it will take, and this is the main difference, and I think the most important difference that you should be aware of before initiating any learnership. It is important that workplace approval will have to take place on the relevant SETA's LMIS, which is the Learner Management Integrated System. It will require you to know, or together with your training provider, ensure that you identify what the workplace requirements are. So what would be necessary for learners to be able to do? And luckily, it is structured in a great way currently in the curriculum document to ensure you know what evidence needs to be collected. Then you need to prepare the workplace for it, because there will be, once you've applied for it, a site visit from the QCTO to ensure that your workplace is ready for learners to be entered into the learnership. Then after the approval of the site visit, or after the site visit is concluded, the approval will take place, and then you can implement the workplace learning, which is your work experience modules, which the training provider should be able to assist you with, and where you will also have mentors available to ensure that they are guided to be able to have the skills that they need to go into this industry. You consistently monitor and report. The QCTO also can have site visits during the program, and then also it will lead to your final assessment and certification in the end. We can move on. When we spoke about how important it is to have a successful learnership, there are 3 stages, I think, to this specifically. And Andrew, you can agree with that, I'm sure. The first one is initiating the learnership. This step is to ensure that you have all of the things in place to get it started and know what you're letting yourself into. Secondly, running the learnership. So initiating is one thing, but actually consistently staying with it for the remainder, I think, is important to talk about what are important things to think and to know in that space. And then lastly, how do you conclude a learnership, and what are the important things to know after that? So the first stage is initiating the learnership. So the first tip we have today is to ensure that you brace yourself for a demanding journey. Now that sounds terrible, but I don't know if you've heard the saying, it's more a marathon, not a sprint. So implementing a learnership isn't just a plug and play. It is a structured commitment, and also it involves cross-functional departments. So you will need someone that steers this ship initially, and then also to ensure that you have someone that keeps it all together throughout the process. So this isn't just a side hustle that you place on your HR assistant. It's someone that actually leads and shows the way and ensures that you have dedicated internal capacity for it, because you will have required mentors that need to be aware that something is coming and that they need to also help in that department.
I feel almost a bit bad, a bit guilty in the early days when we started running learnerships. I think in 2014, we were very trying to convince everyone, which I think is still right, convince everyone that they should be doing these programs because they are fantastic when they work. We've now, I think, become a little bit more circumspect and to try and prefer to almost talk people out of learnerships if they don't know what they're getting themselves into. As Melissa says, it is a mess. I'm sure many of you know it's a big commitment, particularly when you're running a bigger cohort. I think 1 or 2 much easier to manage, but when you're running a big cohort, it's a commitment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also important to know that when you have a good training provider and they've run it multiple times, they have a good guiding space as well, ensuring that you know what you need to do when you need to do it. So I think it is absolutely something that you need to be aware of, because you're not just making a commitment towards your business, but you're also making a commitment to transformation and youth. So, and ensuring that the industry continues in that way. But thank you for that, Andrew. I think it's important to have that as well.
Go in with your eyes wide open.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the second tip I would want to give is prioritizing people over points. And this is important because the BEE points is one thing, but you have to remember that the real value is transforming lives. It's building future talent, and it's contributing to meaningful change. The points are supposed to be the cherry on top of the proverbial BEE cake. And I think that transformation and learner success should be placed first always. We can move on.
Yep.
The third one that I want to bring up is to secure internal buy-in before you start recruiting. This is a very important step. I think numerous learnerships fail because a lot of people that have to mentor or supervise learners in an environment don't necessarily always know that you've applied for funding, and then there is all of the learners. One day they just pitch up and now you have additional responsibilities. I think it's important to ensure that your whole team that participates in this is involved and knows what's coming. And also maybe to get a learnership champion that can get both the clout and the passion to drive this program and to oversee its success. Because I think that learning from someone in terms of your mentors and your supervisors for the industry success and also for the learnership success is very important. So have that commitment prior to even thinking of running the learnership, because it's something that you will have to drive on your side as well as a business.
I think Melissa as well, the learners as well, particularly with employed learnerships, crucial to, as much as it is to get your managers and your internal mentors on board, the learners need to be on board as well. I mean, it hopefully goes without saying. And unemployed learnerships, I think, is maybe realize what they're getting themselves into, although I think most people don't. And so there's a big kind of expectation management piece that needs to happen up front. But certainly with employed learners, your existing staff who you're putting on a program, this isn't just doing a few hours a week or a couple of weeks of training. This is a 12-month, 24-month commitment. There's a full qualification at the end of it, so the journey is well worth it. But I think if they know what they're getting themselves into, the expectations are better managed, you're far more likely to have a successful program and a happier learner throughout.
Absolutely, that's a very good point, Andrew. And I think that when we do learnerships, irrespective whether it's employed or unemployed, that they have to feel like employees, that because they are. The students are employees as well for the time that they are within your business. That is what they are seen as, and that is how they should also be managed. All right, so going over to our fourth tip, that is now the repetition. Recruitment. The importance of recruitment. So you have to recruit like it matters, because it really, really does. So the success of a program begins with who you bring into it. So recruiting learners onto this, I think, to carefully screen aptitude, attitude, and fit. I think there's nothing more terrible than someone coming in that really don't want to be there because they feel that this is not a good fit. So, and some companies use culture fit surveys as well. So you can use interviews, attitude screening, and you can even have like a short boot camp or like short tasks to assess potential, because they will essentially be employees in your company for that period in time. So it's important to ensure that you hire the correct fit, or that you bring in the correct fit in terms of this learnership program. And I know that we do that at Red and Yellow, but a lot of training providers do assist in terms of the recruitment space, and to ensure that you have simultaneously a culturally and a good academic fit. So academics is one thing, work is another. So it's important to bring those two together to ensure that you have a good student that will benefit from this and will pay it forward academically as well as in your company.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. I think Melissa and her team are fantastic, but there's only so much that you can do with the wrong learner or the wrong candidate in a program. Good candidates make the whole process so much
Mm,
easier, so much smoother for everyone, and
mm.
far more likely to have for the student to complete the program, to pass, and to go on to do great things. I mean, you recruit as though you were recruiting for any other role in your organization. Back to you.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, Andrew. I think that most of the successful learnerships which we've run had quite good recruitment drives prior to that, and that really took their time in selecting the candidates prior to initiation. So I know that sometimes that can be a time constraint, but it's important to have, you can either get a partner
It's worth the
involved.
upfront investment. It
Absolutely.
yields rewards,
Yeah.
yeah, for months after.
Awesome. So now we've talked about the initiation part, getting into it, but now actually running a learnership also has some commitments that are involved in that. So the first one specifically would be good onboarding and orientation goes a long way. And boy, let me tell you, if you don't set the tone early, you can't just hand a handbook to them and say, let's call it a day, you can read. It's important to invest in that part as well. So you need to walk through the expectations of what this will look like. This will be on the academic side, which program managers or the training provider usually does in an academic capacity, but onboarding also in the work experience section, because they are essentially employees as well. So it's important to talk them through that type of expectation. What can they expect when they come into the workplace to do that practical component there? And it's also important to introduce them to the mentors, ensuring they know who they are, what they're supposed to do, and what their capacity is in each role. And let them feel part of the team from day one, because that, I think, creates absolute motivation and also loyalty, and ensuring that they have commitment to have this program seen through till the end. I think the second thing that I want to say in terms of the incentivizing performance. So being part of a team is one part of it, but ensuring that you want learners and mentors to show up fully. And this is not just for the learners, this is for your mentors as well. Learners overall, they would work towards something, ensuring that they reach that end goal. They need to be excited that there's something. I think most of our successful learnerships have had small prizes. It doesn't have to be large, it doesn't have to be extravagant, but it needs to mean something, I think, in order to keep them motivated. And also for your mentors, because they're also an equally important part to this equation, because they're essentially taking on something that they didn't do necessarily normally on a day-to-day basis, but they're teaching someone, they're showing someone what it could be like in that specific role. So it's good to also incentivize mentors, because if you have a good mentor, your students will thrive and succeed. So that is an important thing, I think, for you to know as well.
But before we jump, sorry, just under incentivization, I think just to add to what Melissa's saying, we've seen success. We talk about rewards or prizes, like they don't have to be financial. They can be, maybe a take a lot voucher on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. We've seen some success rates with that. It could be a day's leave, or as I said, non-monetary things. You might have other things within your business that are value-added benefits that could be given to students who perform. Well, I was just thinking of something and I lost it. And also just the power of positive reinforcements and celebrating successes. We will do this naturally from our side, but also internally within your organization. Celebrate the learners internally. Put them in your internal communications. Profile them in your business. It really does mean a lot. Everyone likes to be celebrated, and those sorts of things are quite meaningful and have a big impact in people staying on the program. Another thing I just want to touch on very quickly under this incentivizing, it's not directly related, but it is very closely related, and that is the matter of remuneration. When you're paying a stipend, obviously this is more on the unemployed learnership space. Make sure, if you can, that the stipend is as market related or as high as you can possibly justify or afford. There's two primary reasons for this. Firstly, I think is the being a good employer. And being respectful of the time and commitments and efforts that learners put in, and the difficult circumstances at home that many of them come from. So reward fairly. You're far more likely to see success if somebody is able to get in to the workplace, is able to access online content out of hours, is able to afford transport, living, accommodation, food. And can get by, not only because they're able to fully commit themselves, but also there's less reason for them to drop off. And that is a reality that we all need to face. So reward them fairly and as well as you possibly can. The other related matter there is if you don't reward well enough or you don't reward fairly, what is quite rife is learnership hopping. Again, this comes back to recruitment. If you recruit the right candidates, hopefully you can pick up past patterns and hopefully select candidates who are less likely to do this. But it is, I think many of you will know this, it is a well-known thing, a well-known habit where students will jump from the minute they get an opportunity to move to a learnership with a higher stipend for them to move across. So you improve your throughput, your performance rates by paying fairly, and that yields benefits in terms of increased salary recognition, PE points, funding tranches because you don't have drop-offs. So it's a good investment, I think, in addition to just being good business.
Absolutely, Andrew. I think that is a great point to make. But also closely related to this one is the aligning learnerships to KPIs and development plans, which is our tip 7. And this is, I think, true for the learners as well as for the mentors again as well, is that this is also the measuring tool that you would be able to help get to a place where you can measure performance, whether to incentivize or to celebrate in that way. So the important thing is if it's a personal development plan or to your KPIs or even to promotions, if there's an absorption at the end, if that is a possibility in your business specifically, I think that this helps people also see that it's not just additional admin specifically for the mentors, but it's actually part of their role, part of their job. And I think that changes the trajectory of performance as well. Then going over to enlisting strong mentors and managers, and I think this also hinges on the previous one. Mentors are your frontline. And a lot of training providers will be able to assist you to orientate your mentors and ensure that they know exactly what they need to do when they need to do it. But it's also important to choose the right people to mentor your learners, because they have to be people that communicate well. They have to have empathy and patience, because a lot of these students, especially in the unemployed section, come from really rough backgrounds sometimes, and they really want to change their lives and make a difference. And it's also important to get mentors that know their stuff, that knows what is supposed to happen when it needs to happen, and to give them the tools to succeed. Don't just throw them in the deep end. I think it's important to give your mentors the tools to succeed. Train them on what is expected under the QCTO. Your training provider can also assist you with that, and help them to mentor with intention and purpose. That is, I think, the most important thing in this section for me. Then also communication, constantly and frequently. The one thing I think that makes a great learnership is that everyone knows what's happening, when it needs to happen, and they have the proper feedback and know where interventions need to take place. Ghosting isn't just a thing that doesn't work in dating, but it also doesn't work in learnerships, let me tell you. So it's important to schedule regular check-ins, create some feedback loops, and keep your lines of communication open. And in this tripartite relationship, if you will allow me to use that, which is between the training provider, the learner, as well as the employer, to ensure that you keep that communication best possibly open, with feedback sessions regularly structured, reporting, and that there are milestones that you have, and ensuring that you track the learners, so that at the beginning of a learnership, you can already indicate who are learners who are struggling, so that we can assist you to get an academic plan in place, or how can we support them better? How can we do better to make sure that this learner succeeds in the end? I think this is a very important point. Then this number 10 specifically, I would want to say work is work, yes, and practicals are practical, but it's also important to know that these students are also learners. They are learning. And a lot of them don't necessarily have the capacity at home or the data, or they struggle to sometimes be able to do things after hours. So it's important to create some space and time for them to learn whilst they're in your presence at work. Specifically with the QCTO programs, if it's an employed learner, create a space for them where they can learn. Build time into their week, whether it is a day or two, or an hour or two in a day, to be able to work on the content. It's quite intense, the content, and I can honestly tell you the amount that you will get as a return on investment for them spending time on the material is significant. And support them with the tools. I think the most successful learnerships which we've seen has assisted students to ensure that they have the tools in order to complete the program, whether that is in the form of a laptop or in the form of data or the relevant software which they require to be able to complete it. I think that that investment pays off in commitment and competence in the end.
I think on this point, what we've seen, certainly some of the lessons from I think clients who've done this quite well is, I mean, different businesses have different approaches to how much latitude or flexibility they give to their staff, but actually allocating a day or a portion where you say to your learners, if they're on site, okay, Friday afternoons or Fridays, this is the day you focus on your work. We want you all in here. You're going to be in here. That you can closely monitor them. They're doing their work together in the same room, which means they can riff off each other, which is great. Think about maybe you can bring in coffees, snacks, things like that to make it a less painful experience. Not that certainly coming to Red and Yellow, we try and make it as exciting, as engaging, as fun as possible. But learning, particularly over 12 months, is tough for anyone who's trying to go through it. So try and make it as fun and as engaging and light as possible. And structure always helps as well. So don't always, if you've got the facilities and the means to do it, actually build it into the structure in the workplace. I know it can be difficult if they are doing kind of work, if they're actually got projects and they're working on live work. The demands of the daily routine in the office don't always provide for this. But if you can build it in far enough in their diaries, and your managers and mentors know and trust and respect it, it definitely goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it also creates the respect. I think that learners feel supported in that way, and that you are also committed in terms of their success. So I think that is the ultimate. When we move over to stage 3 now, and I think talking about concluding the learnership, I think the relevant point I would like to make here is to avoid premature withdrawals. So I think sometimes things get bumpy, and we will be remiss if we don't say that. Sometimes things don't work out necessarily the way that we plan. And learners sometimes struggle. Sometimes the work is really difficult and they need that additional support. But I want to ask, in terms of success of a learnership, to resist the urge to cut ties too quickly. You have a designated program manager that can work with you with an academic support plan if it is an academic thing. There are multiple recourses to take in terms of trying to get to a point of salvage instead of getting to a place where you just say, okay, it's over. I think you can try a little bit of coaching, bring in your mentor or reshuffling some of the responsibilities. And remember also, early exits can eventually affect the cherry on the cake, which is the BEE point and your funding. So try and avoid the early deregistration in that way. Then number 12, I think.
Just a final point on that. Sorry, I was getting
Yeah.
engaged in the good chats and questions in the chat.
Awesome.
Is also just absorption, staying in touch
Mhm.
with your learners. You know, you've obviously interested in your absorption points, which means we need to be able to find them so that we can demonstrate that they are actively employed. That you can get your absorption points, and if you lose contact with them, it can be tricky to reinstate that contact. And so, keeping in regular contact with learners is always great. You could, if you're at the point where if you're keeping actively engaged with them, it could just be a matter of giving them a call or dropping them on WhatsApp and saying, where are you? Are you? Let us know what's going on. And you can also start to pick up before, verification, and that always happens in a very short space of time. And so scrambling to try and find somebody right at the last minute is stressful and sometimes not easy to do. Whereas if you know that you're losing somebody 3 months and you're going to verification in 3 months, at least you've got time to try and trace them down. And what we've also found helps if we're trying to incentivize or coax people to come and let us know what's happening after we've lost control of them. We've lost contact with them. Offer an incentive to get them to come in. You need some documentation, you need some paperwork. I mean, this goes across the board. A couple of $100, a voucher or something like that. It's, you might not want to pay it, but it's certainly, if you're looking at the outcomes and the value of those points, it's probably a very, very good value exchange. So just something to keep in mind.
I think that is a great point, and thank you for jumping the keep in touch gun here at the end, Andrew. Also, after the learnership, I think it's important to ensure that you don't break your ties with your learners, even if they successfully completed the program. I think that they can eventually come back as employees, or they can refer future great learners, which would be a great point for the recruitment, which we spoke about. And then also they can be your brand ambassadors. I think that it's not just educational institutions that realize the assets that alumni can be once they've completed a learnership. So it's important to keep that relationship warm. You never know when that bridge is going to cross again. So thank you for bringing that one up to our attention. And then lastly, our final tip, and I think that this is one of the most important ones for me, is to celebrate the milestones. I think it's such an important thing and such a great achievement. A learnership isn't just a certificate or a qualification. It is the start of someone's career. And post a graduation, or even if it's a awards handout or something that you do specifically for them that makes it special, that they've completed this 12-month program or whichever length together. Bring in your execs, but make it truly special. And I think that this is something that creates an event to look forward to, or something to work towards, to say, this is the event that we hosted previously, this is what you can look forward to, and celebrate it with them publicly. I think that recognition, which we spoke about before in one of the tips, it does matter. There's nothing more beautiful, and that is something that psychologists say, there's nothing more beautiful than to hear your own name, and especially if it's something in a positive light. So good work matters. And honestly, I think this will build great goodwill, not just for your learners, but for your mentors as well. And celebrate them at this event as well, because they have also worked equally as hard to ensure that the learner has success. And that is, I think, just before you continue with the upcoming learnerships, I think the secret to the successful learnership isn't just about compliance. I think it's about commitment and building relationships and a true focus on transformation. And irrespective whether it goes from SETA to QCTO, I think that there are a lot of people that can assist you and guide you. Your training provider knows the process and steps as well. So ensure that you ask the relevant questions, and if you struggle, we're always here to answer those questions for you and assist you in the process going forward. Thank you. Andrew, back to you.
Vic, Kat, do you want to put up that last poll? I hope you guys all enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you learned something, and thanks to everyone who's been putting things in the chat. Mike Tiger pointed out that the new minimum wages have been gazetted, and those include learnerships. I'm just sharing a link in the chat now. Hopefully it's to the right document. I've been trying to do things on the fly whilst I try to listen to Melissa at the same time and respond. But some great engagement. Thank you, everyone. If we didn't address your point directly, I see there are some interesting and some challenging questions in the chat. We'll pick up afterwards with you. We'll go through a couple now if we've got time. But yeah, just to highlight some of the upcoming learnerships, we have our ACA grad program for advertising agencies, which will be running again next year. In February. That will still be under the SETA. It will be the final run of our SETA program. It's based on the EQF5 National Certificate in Advertising. Fantastic program. So if you're an agency and interested in finding out more about that, let us know. I can see some of our agency clients who are involved in it on the call right now. But yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing conversation. We're happy to help out as much as we can, even if we don't have or don't know the specific answer to a technical or complex challenge or question that might be new to you, might be new to us. We will do what we can to try and find an answer and to work with you to address it. This is new for a lot of us. And so we were going to go through it together, and in the spirit of partnership, we want to make sure that we add as much value and are as available to assist as we can. And that approach, I think, has stood us in pretty good stead over the last 11, 12 years that we've been running learnership programs. Kat, have you posted the final poll? Fantastic. That's great. I'm trying to remember what slide is next. So it looks like most of our attendees, which is what we were expecting, have not run. 63% of you haven't been involved in QCTO and are anxious. That's you're in good company. Only 4%, one of your respondents is very comfortable running QCTO programs. So that one person, I can't see it in the poll, but we're definitely going to reach out to you for your guidance and assistance in some of the questions. So thank you. If there's anything else, let me just have a look. Max, but there we go. So that's we don't have a URL here for this, but we published a learnership guideline a couple of years ago, which has proven to be very popular. It was downloaded hundreds of times, and we've updated it now for the new QCTO framework. So that, I think, is being finalized today, and so you will have a link to download it in the mail with everything else that we will send out following this. So we encourage you, please, to download it, share it. If you've got bills or things you want to add, please do include those. We see it as a value-adding resource, and we want to make sure that as many people are using it as possible, and that it's as useful to everyone who needs it. We developed this initially because we couldn't find one ourselves, and so we thought we'd take a stab at doing it. So hopefully you find it useful. In terms of questions, let me just have a quick flick through to see if there is anything in here that sorry, I'm just scrolling through. I see there was a question about what a fair stipend rate would be. Our kind of the indications, we always say obviously err on the side of paying as much as you can on the higher side. Ranges typically vary between 2,500 to 8,000 Rand. Linda suggests paying on the higher side. Cost of living has increased a lot over the last few years, and we appreciate that almost by definition, learners are not coming from families where the student or the learner can afford to work for free or for a low wage, and stay at home and be supported by the parents. They actually this is they need the money just to be able to live and to be able to do what they need to do in the workplace, and to study at the same time, which is quite a lot. Mike very kindly pointed out the minimum wage, the new minimum wages, which have been gazetted. So I think I've shared the link in the chat. It's hopefully easy enough to find on Google if you're looking for it. Lorato says I think a fair stipend is to cover transportation, if attendance is physical data, things like that. It depends on industry, etc., etc. And I think it should be our duty as learners to also research on that before we complain about stipends, as we normally do. So thank you, Lorato. It is a two-way street. So as much as the employers need to be fair and good employers, learners need to be good employees as well. So thank you for that.
Just another question in the the Q&A section. We've already answered if you will be able to watch this after the fact. Yes, it is recorded, and we will send it out with a mailer. And the second question is, if training providers use venues to host learnership classroom training sessions, how will workplace approval work? So I will take this one if that's fine, Andrew. So it's important to note that the work experience module, which is what happens in the workplace or is supposed to happen in the workplace with a QCTO program, has to happen in the workplace. The practical module is there for simulated sessions, but the workplace approval is to actually see that on-the-job training is actually taking place and that the skills which you've practiced is done within the industry. That's also why when you go through the accreditation process, they require you to either provide affidavits or who will be your industry partner when you have a QCTO program where learners will be placed. So it's very important to note that they have specific evidence that they need to collect from work experience modules, and workplace approval happens the same way. So employers have to go and ensure that they register on the learner management system of the relevant SETA. Each SETA differs, I'm sure, from place to place with small details, but that is the QCTO requirement, is to ensure that you have your workplace registered. I know that it's true for mixed SETA, for TETA, as well as for services SETA. So ensure that you speak to your SETA representative as well as to, if you have a training provider on that, to ensure that they are following the process as best possible, to ensure that you don't have disappointment at the end, that you can't exit your students. I hope that answers your question.
There are two questions that I think I'll pick up. One from Wendy, just continuing the conversation around stipends, and just asking for confirmation of what the minimum wage for an example. I think matric with 130 credits being 3,755. I'm not sure I can give you the answer on the call. I need to just double check that against the actual Gazette itself. But Wendy, happy to pick that up with you, and we can just align and make sure that we're all in agreement. If anyone else knows the answer offhand or has done the calculations, please feel free to jump in the chat and share. But that does seem that should be a relatively straightforward one to address. And then another question from Colette, I think, just around dispersed workplaces. So a field sales environment, how would you with learners all over the place out in the field, how would you manage the QCTO workplace approval? And I think, Melissa, unless you know the answer offhand,
yes,
feel free to jump on that. Otherwise, I have already indicated to Colette we're happy to pick that conversation up and help offline.
I'll just do a last thing. So obviously the main workplace does the workplace approval, but the QCTO goes to different sites, and if it's relevant to the curriculum, remember they take the curriculum into consideration. So each workplace assignment that you do within the work experience program has a specific element of tool or trade that it needs to do in the workplace. So whether it's at one site or at different sites, they will then just conduct within that specific space. But it is the main, if you have a decentralized or a centralized space that does the funding, they will ensure that they do the workplace visits at the relevant areas that are indicated. It's part of the approval process to indicate where the students will be located. Also very important with the QCTO programs. Up until this point, I know that they're talking about developments up into Africa going forward, but workplace experience modules have to be completed within South Africa and within the country itself, because that is where they will come and do the site visits. I hope that answers your question.
Fantastic. I think we're 5 minutes from time, and I think we've addressed questions. Colette, Wendy will pick up separately with you, just to make sure you're clear on everything that you need, and if there is any further assistance you need, then fantastic. But we hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've taken some at least, if everyone takes one insight or one tip that actually delivers value for them out of this, then we'd be thrilled. We'd love to have all of you participate in some of our upcoming programs, both under the current SETA framework and the new QCTO programs that we're rolling out this year and into next year. We will be adding more, so keep your eyes open. But yeah, we'd love to work more with you, and if we can be of any assistance, please reach out on the email address below, or through any of our other channels. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to continue the conversation, and enjoy the last. We'll give you 4 minutes back in your day. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday and rest of the week, and we hope to speak to you soon. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.